Some people lose money and gain trust. Others keep their money and lose both. The strange part is that trust, once earned, often creates more value than what was given away in the first place. When someone gives without pressure or expectation, it sends a quiet signal. It says they are not trying to take advantage of the moment. It says they are safe to deal with. And over time, that signal becomes something much bigger than the act itself. And once you start noticing that pattern, you begin to see something deeper happening beneath simple acts of generosity. Because generosity is not just about helping someone in the moment. It is about shaping how people feel around you, how they interpret your intentions, and how they decide whether you are worth trusting. The first shift happens in how people read behavior. Most interactions in life carry a hidden question. What does this person want from me? People are constantly scanning for motives, even if they don't realize it. They look for signs of pressure, manipulation, or hidden agendas. And the moment they sense any of that, even slightly, they pull back. But when someone gives without attaching a condition, that pattern breaks. There is no immediate benefit to decode, no hidden demand to respond to. The interaction becomes simple, and that simplicity creates a kind of psychological relief. That relief matters more than it seems. Because when people feel that they don't have to defend themselves, they begin to open up. Not fully at once, but gradually. Their guard lowers, their responses become more genuine, and over time, that creates a foundation that most people never consciously build. Trust rarely comes from words. It comes from repeated moments where someone proves they are not a threat. Generosity becomes one of the clearest ways to send that signal. And once that signal is received more than once, it starts forming a pattern in the other person's mind. A quiet conclusion begins to take shape. This person is different. That's when the second shift begins. People don't just trust actions, they trust patterns. One generous act can feel like a moment, but repeated generosity feels like character. And character is what people rely on when they make decisions about who to trust. Over time, people start predicting your behavior. They assume you will act fairly. They expect that you won't exploit situations. And those expectations begin to shape how they treat you in return. They become more cooperative, more open, more willing to share information, opportunities, and support. Not because they feel obligated, but because they feel safe. That safety is extremely valuable. Because in most environments, whether personal or professional, people hold back more than they show. They keep ideas to themselves. They hesitate before offering help. They stay cautious until they are sure. But with someone they trust, that hesitation fades. And once that happens, things begin to move differently. Opportunities are not always given directly. Sometimes they are simply not hidden anymore. People mention things they would normally keep quiet. They make introductions they wouldn't risk otherwise. They include you in decisions where trust matters more than skill. This is where generosity starts to show its long-term effect. Not as a transaction, but as access. Access to conversations, access to relationships, access to moments where most people are not present. And none of that feels forced. It happens naturally because the environment around you has changed. You are no longer just another person trying to gain something. You are someone people feel comfortable building with. And once that perception is formed, it becomes difficult to replace. Because trust is not easily transferable. Skills can be matched, resources can be replaced, but trust, once established deeply, creates a kind of stability that people hold on to. They prefer to work with someone they trust, even if there are better options available on paper. That preference shapes long-term outcomes in ways that are not always visible at first. Because success is rarely about one big moment. It is about a series of decisions made by others, who they choose to include, who they choose to support, who they choose to recommend. And those decisions are often guided by trust more than anything else. Over time, generosity quietly influences all of them, not by forcing results, but by shaping perception. And once perception is shaped, behavior follows. This is where it becomes deeper. Because generosity does not only affect how others see you, it also changes how you see yourself. When you consistently act in a way that benefits others, even in small ways, it begins to form an internal identity. You start to see yourself as someone who contributes rather than someone who only takes. That identity affects your decisions. You become less defensive, less reactive, less focused on immediate gain, and more focused on long-term value. That shift is subtle but powerful. Because when your decisions are not driven by fear of loss, they become more stable, more thoughtful, more consistent, and consistency is what strengthens trust even further. People notice when someone behaves the same way across different situations. They notice when someone doesn't change based on advantage. And that reliability creates something stronger than trust. It creates confidence. Confidence that this person will not suddenly act differently when circumstances change. That kind of confidence is rare, and because it is rare, it becomes extremely valuable. There is also a social layer to this. People talk, not always directly, but constantly. They share experiences, impressions, and small stories about others, and generosity tends to leave a mark in those conversations. Not in a loud way, but in a lasting one. Someone remembers that you helped without being asked. Someone mentions that you handled a situation fairly. Someone recalls a moment where you didn't take advantage, even when you could have. Those moments travel. They move through networks quietly, shaping how others perceive you before they even meet you. That's when trust starts forming before interaction. And that changes everything. Because when someone already has a positive expectation of you, their first interaction is different. They are more open from the start, more willing to engage, more receptive. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from a position that has already been built, all because of actions that may have seemed small at the time. At some point, many of us have experienced the opposite. A moment where someone acted in a way that made us question their intentions. Maybe they tried to gain too much from a situation. Maybe they held back when it mattered. Maybe they made things feel transactional. And even if it was just one moment, it changed how we saw them. Trust can weaken quickly, but building it takes time. And that's what makes generosity so powerful. It consistently pushes trust in the right direction, even when the effect is not immediately visible. Think about the people you trust the most, not the ones who are impressive, not the ones who are successful, the ones who feel reliable. There is usually a pattern behind that feeling. At some point, they showed you, through their actions, that they were not focused on taking advantage. They made something easier for you. They removed pressure. They acted fairly when they didn't have to. And those moments stayed. Because trust is not built through big gestures. It is built through repeated signals. Signals that say, you can relax around me. And once someone feels that, it is very hard to undo. If something like that has ever shaped how you see someone, you probably understand how powerful that feeling is. And if you've experienced it from someone else, it's worth thinking about what it created for you. Because those small moments often have long-term effects. If you've ever had someone trust you simply because of how you treated them, I'd genuinely like to hear about that. Because those experiences are usually more meaningful than we realize at the time. Over time, something else begins to happen. Trust starts to compound. It doesn't just stay between two people. It expands. When one person trusts you, they are more likely to connect you with others. And those new connections often come with a level of trust already attached. That makes every new interaction smoother, faster, easier, more open. And that creates a kind of momentum, not because you are chasing it, but because the environment around you is shaped by how people feel about you. This is where generosity becomes less about individual actions and more about long-term positioning. You are not just building moments, you are building a reputation that carries weight across different situations, and that reputation starts influencing outcomes in ways you don't directly control. People advocate for you in rooms you are not in. They support your ideas without you asking. They defend your intentions when others question them, all because they have experienced something consistent from you. And that consistency came from how you chose to act when there was no immediate reward. There is also something quieter happening beneath all of this. When people trust you, they don't just give you opportunities, they give you margin. They are more forgiving when mistakes happen, more patient when things take time, more willing to understand rather than judge. That margin can make a huge difference, because no one operates perfectly all the time, but people who are trusted are allowed to recover, and people who are not trusted are often judged quickly. So the value of trust is not only in what it creates, but also in what it protects. It protects relationships from breaking too easily. It protects opportunities from disappearing after one mistake. It protects your position in environments where others might struggle to stay. All of that comes from something that started with simple acts of generosity, not dramatic ones, just consistent, thoughtful choices. Near the end, it becomes clear that generosity is not about losing something. It is about building something that cannot be easily taken away. Money can move, positions can change, circumstances can shift, but trust, once deeply built, stays connected to you. It becomes part of how people see you, how they remember you, and how they decide to engage with you. And that kind of value continues to work long after the moment of giving is past. So the real question is not whether generosity costs something, it's whether you recognize what it quietly creates in return. Because in the long run, trust is not just helpful. It becomes one of the strongest forms of advantage a person can have. And once you understand that, you start to see generosity differently, not as something you lose, but as something you invest into a system that most people never fully notice. If ideas like this make you see human behavior a little differently, you might find the next conversation just as interesting.